And a really important question to ask a person who is thinking about suicide um, is, do you want to kill yourself, or do you just want the pain to stop? And you'll find that in almost all cases, it's the latter. They just want the pain to stop. Someone once described it like this: the person who takes their own life is like a person jumping out of a flaming building because they don't want to be burnt to death. And so somehow it's much better in that moment to escape the flames, but they don't want to die. I think it's extraordinary statistic. There's something like 17, I think it might be increasing, 17 or 19 people a day in the UK are dying by suicide. 19 people a day. I mean, it's an extraordinary phenomenon. And it's something that really needs to be addressed. It is an epidemic, and it's a worldwide epidemic. And in the face of this, we might say we're completely powerless. And something like Mind UK, who are doing great work, I've mentioned before, we need to help them, we need to support them, and other charities are doing this work. But ultimately, there's never going to be enough that we can do, because there's always those people that we can't reach. But what they need is to hear the good news. But also, I have to say, there are those who have, despite every effort, they've succumbed to the disease, the illness. It is a sickness. They have taken their lives. And we have to remember that those people are in the hands of the mercy of God. And we firmly, really, really believe that these people did not want to take their lives. And so it has to be a comfort to those families in that terrible, terrible rupture and that terrible darkness, to understand that that person wanted really to experience mercy.
Yeah, can you explain to us a bit, what's been the sort of the change or the development in thinking about that? Because traditionally, suicide was one of the worst things that it is one of the worst things that can happen. But the church was quite kind of harsh in its kind of response. You weren't allowed to be buried in consecrated ground, and maybe not even a funeral in the past was possible. I mean, those things have sort of slightly changed. Why? What's been the kind of change in thinking?
It's so true. I remember even 20 years ago, a very dear friend came to me. She was from another country, and she said that her brother was a priest, refused to bury her husband who'd killed himself, because it was a disgrace on the family, and it was a humiliation, a shame, and above all, it was a mortal sin, which was, he said, unforgivable. Well, I mean, we understand now that in the majority of cases, suicide is.
I mean, the church's response, in a sense, is kind of correct. It's an incredibly sort of terrible thing to take one's own life, but in what situation? That's the question.
Yeah. No, I mean, the world's understanding of suicide being a consequence of mental health, we can't get away from the fact that it is something utterly destructive. It is violence against oneself and violence against the human nature of a person, and ultimately against God's love itself. However, the Catechism describes that three conditions necessary for a sin to be culpable. I mean, it's a serious sin. It is a sin. We have to understand sin not in a kind of wagging finger sense, but a sin as in a rupture of goodness. And the first thing is that it's a grave matter, which death is, suicide is. And secondly, that one knows it is. Most people who take their life know that it's wrong. The consequences of it are devastating for families and so on. But thirdly is that culpability element. So often people who take their lives, we know from evidence from suicide survivors, we know that they're not always in their right mind. They don't really know what they're doing. I mean, there's I can't remember the name of the fellow. There's a chap who goes around the world advocating mental health awareness when he jumped off the Severn Bridge. I think it was Severn Bridge in the States, and he survived. And he said the minute he jumped, sorry, not the minute, the second he jumped, he had clarity of mind, and he realized that he'd done something wrong, and he totally regretted it. And he cried out to God, said, God, I'm so sorry. Thankfully, he survived, I mean, not without consequences, but he's helped us to understand that actually, yes, it is a serious, serious issue. It's a moral issue. Those who deliberately take their lives with full freedom of knowledge, that's another matter entirely. But in the majority of cases, the church has understood that it is so complicated. It really is.